1982. The Civil War started in 75 up to 1990. And there were so many references to East Beirut and West Beirut. Those of us who lived in Beirut, we know. But for maybe audience members who don't quite understand what is East Beirut versus West Beirut, what happened, and these ma'abir, these crossings that were shutting in the movie one by one till none remained open. Can you just comment on that so people can contextualize?
Yes, I would just kind of proceed in saying that this is applicable to any divided city historically. So I felt like I didn't necessarily need to explain very deeply what East and West Beirut is, because a divided city is a divided city, is a divided people, is a divided nation. And this for me was very, very important to just place there. The film itself is not about the divisions, the geography of division, rather. It's about the emotional division between people. At the time, just to contextualize in literal form, Lebanon was divided into East Beirut and West Beirut. East Beirut being the predominantly Christian section of the country, whereas West Beirut was referred to as the predominantly Muslim, but it was actually West Beirut encompassed not only West Beirut, but the rest of Lebanon, because East Beirut was an enclave, and the rest of Lebanon was very mixed. And West Beirut was very mixed, as a matter of fact, though it was the more pro-Palestinian and more on the leftist side of things. East Beirut was sort of the right side. It was governed by the Phalange primarily, though there were elements within East Beirut that were leftists, same as, So anyway, so I just felt I didn't, for me, I was very careful not to define East Beirut as being solely Christian or West Beirut being solely Muslim, because they weren't. But this is what the general media has always led us to believe, and always led us to think, and has always led us to sort of assume, because it's simpler. It's easier for the news to say, yeah, Christian East Beirut and Muslim West Beirut, because it's policy to separate these things. And I refused to, I wanted to subscribe to the reality of these two worlds.
In fact, there was a line in the film where I think the one
yes,
was from West Beirut.
Yeah.
And immediately, so is you Muslim or Christian?
Yes.
And that is exactly what you're talking
yes.
about. Yeah, thank you for not being binary. Thank you for not showing the
stereotypical narrative, which is not particularly 100% true.
Yeah. So thank you. So can we talk a little bit about the setting?
Sure.
Where was this filmed? Was this a real school?
This was.
It was amazing, nestled in the forest.
The setting is actually a very geographically Lebanese setting. As we know, Lebanon has a very thin strip of land with an outlet, kind of like a tongue that's kind of extends it to the sea, and that's Beirut. But most of Lebanon is the facade of Lebanon is actually this really thin strip of land with a sea, and then you have mountains. So this is a school in the mountains in Lebanon, and it's, as a matter of fact, it's not unique, as beautiful as it is. Lebanon has a lot of these schools in the mountains that overlook the sea or overlook the city. It's part of, and a lot of the schools that were founded during the pre-colonial period even, because the school was founded in the 1800s, and in the late 1800s was a Quaker school. And it's they were founded by a lot of missions. There's Jesuit schools, there's Quaker schools, there's Protestant schools. There's all these schools that actually straddle all these mountaintops, overlooking different parts of Lebanon. And this is a school I went to.
Oh, it's the actual school you went to?
It is actually the school I went to, and the film actually, they agreed to let me shoot there. As a matter of fact, Wissam was sitting where I was sitting. So, and the hallway was our hallway, and the aquarium existed in our hallway, as we saw in the film. At the beginning of the film, you notice there's an aquarium with a couple of fish. It's in the corner of the front. Anyway, so there's the film is really lifted from my memory of my last day of school in Lebanon in 1982, and we left the country three weeks later. And I felt it was very necessary to actually bring this narrative to life because nobody's ever discussed 1982. And 1982 is such a polemic year for us Lebanese people. It's a moment in time that changes the course of Middle Eastern history and the course of Lebanese history. And it really shed a light about the deep divisions in the country. And I felt we needed to address this. And I was shocked when I decided to make this film that there was no other film made about that period. You know, whereas it's as important it's very important, and we need to show our experience and our human experience. And I thought,
right. I mean, I was thinking of Ziad Doueri's, West Beirut and other films, but they did not quite go here. And the idea of, talking about 1982, maybe some people consider it the peak of the Civil War. And yet not showing any violence, but creating this feeling like we were there. I mean, it's maybe hard for us because we were there, but for people who weren't there, and we'd love to hear from the audience, this feeling of constantly, pretending nothing's happening outside, eyes on the exam.
Yep.
The teacher is ill-equipped. She doesn't know how to handle this.
The emotional
Kids to worry about. But she's afraid, and she has this, breakdown at one point.
When she loses it,
I mean,
she does.
how much of that?
It's very interesting because one of the things that's very important to realize, and we tend to forget it when we become adults, is that kids have instincts. And kids see and read us as adults way more than we even think they do. And they understand, and they pick up the details, and they retain them, though they don't express them perhaps. And this was very important for me to show. It's because I remember, there was someone at one point, they're like, well, the kids should all be crying, but I remember that day very vividly, and I don't remember everybody crying. As a matter of fact, I remember we were very excited we're not going to school tomorrow.
Like Majid was saying.
Like Majid was, exactly.
To play Atari and 1982.
Yes, I mean, we preferred to be in the shelter playing games than being in the school. I mean, that's a normal kid's response to this thing. But at the same time, I as a kid personally was very observant of the adult tensions that were going on. And I felt I needed to represent that. And that's represented in the adult narrative in the film. Because it's a suppressed narrative that's not particularly that kind of emotionally expresses a lot but doesn't explain a lot. Which is actually exactly what I had. I didn't come to understand these polemics until later. Because we had people on both sides of the divide in my extended family. It's like, oh, you don't talk about this guy because he's a leftist. And it's like, those things weren't explained to me. I came to understand them in 1993 after Lebanon opened, and I went down to West Beirut, and I went to university down there, and I literally felt like I had lived my entire life in a little village because I arrived in West Beirut and I felt I was standing under a waterfall and trying to drink it. Of information, of pluralism, of mixed people, mixed cultures. So it was like, for me, it was like, I felt I was lied to my entire life being in East Beirut because we were like so sheltered and shielded. Even our news, we were in a bubble. We didn't know what was really going on the other side. Anyway, so yeah, I think I'm going off on a tangent.
No, but I mean, going back to the school, I think that adds a whole new dimension to be able to go to the very same school, you went to the same hallways.
Yes, same hallways.
But this time as a writer-director of a slice of your own life, but that of so many of us, and then being able to film it, that just gains a new...
Yeah, and I think also the decision to make this film was very much like, you want to complete the narrative. You want to say our narrative, I realize, has never been said. And we had two extraordinary films come out of Israel, Waltz with Bashir and Lebanon, which address a point of view on that. And I felt like, and I didn't realize this, but I was pitching the project in Dubai, and there was the head of the German film board. And I pitched the project, and she's like, and literally her words were like, finally, Lebanon's answer to Waltz with Bashir. And I'm like, I didn't set out to make this film, even though that's in some German papers, that's how it was cited, because it's a very different kind of film. But what's interesting is this is a narrative that needs to be told from both sides, because film creates conversation. And when leaders are not brave, we need to actually be brave in our humanism to actually try to break this down so we can actually talk forward.
You brought us back to 1982. I was watching it on the big screen. I'm noticing everything from the cars, from the Rubik's Cube, from the kind of pen, it's just, how much work did you have to do?
I had a fantastic team.
Really? It was was this shot in 82 and just released? You brought us back to 1982. It was details of every object, the eraser, with the
100%.
So
we worked. I had an amazing production design team, an amazing wardrobe team, and everybody was very fastidious in everything to the finest details. Even the exams were exactly what they were.
I was thinking, I think I took that same exam with
exactly.
to put the rule. I want to talk about the casting,
yes.
And then I have one more question, and then we're going to open it up because I'm sure the audience is going to want to share the moment with you. The casting.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, casting kids, and so many kids, what were they auditioned?
They were, it was a process.
Because there's a lot, okay, we got the main kids, of course, they were amazing.
Yeah.
But you also had to work with classrooms.
Yes, my casting team was not very happy with that. we were shooting this thing during the summer, so what made it really easy for the parents in particular is they felt that they were sending their kids to summer camp. And they would, even when we weren't shooting with the kids, sometimes they would call out my casting team and they'd be like, can we just drop off the kids? And we're like, no, we're working, we're shooting.
Yeah, and they got to be in a film.
And they got to be in a film. Basically, honestly, I directed the kids, but they also directed me. I cannot really say that this is only my work because I had to listen to them. I had to listen to how they lived, how they behaved. I had to listen to them tell me, Oualid, when they read some scenes, this is not how we do it. And I had to restructure a lot of the stuff based on my work with them. I'll just try to be as fast as possible because that's a whole process of how to deal with the kids. But we cast a wide net for 700, we saw about 700 kids across a multitude of schools, different classes, different religions, different schools, different types of schools. And I wanted to mix it up because I wanted the film to reflect the pluralism of the country, even in process, not just in the final product. And with that, from there we went to about 150 that came in for secondary auditions. From there we went to about 30. And those 30 I brought into a 6-week workshop. And that 6-week workshop was something that I'd structured, I'd been thinking about for years before, and I wasn't sure it was going to work. It was basically constantly having cameras rolling, but not necessarily rehearsing, talking, hanging out, playing, doing trust exercises, but most importantly also watching movies together. I watched movies. We watched Oualid Mouaness, the Looming film, which is a very powerful film. We watched My Life as a Zucchini, The Wizard of Oz, The Goonies, Close Encounters, all of these. And every week we would watch a different film, and we would discuss this film. And we discussed this film from a different prism, not from mine, from theirs. And I had them tell me what they thought of these actors in these films. And they arrived at a point where they can tell me anything and I can tell them anything. And they used this, they basically created their own sort of bar for performances, and they knew they needed to match their own bar. And I gave them the liberty to tell me on set when I'm telling them to do something that they wouldn't do, and adjusted accordingly. Because at the end of the day, I'm not building my world. I need to build a world of theirs that feels real to them as kids when they watch the movie.
I mean, these kids, they were us, but
Well, they were a
I
gift.
saw myself. I mean, it was that authentic. But can we talk about Nadine Labaki?
Sure.
Nadine Labaki, who I think was in San Francisco when Capernaum was released, and Serge Bakhalian was kind enough to allow me to go interview her. I'll never forget that favor in my life, because sitting with her as a director, and that movie, was
A very powerful film.
Very powerful film. But seeing her as an actress, and
She's
working with her, can you tell us just a little bit about how that happened and how the experience was?
I had shared the script with Nadine way back in 2013, and she loved it back then, and she agreed to do the role. And I wasn't sure how the stars were going to align. Because I was still financing the film. I'm like, well, let's see how the financing goes. And then sure enough, financing turned around in 2017. I asked her if she'd do the film. She's like, let me reread the script. She reread it. She was in the middle of post-production of Capernaum. She had a vacation, and she's like, Oualid, I can give you 2 weeks of my vacation. I can't give you a whole month. I'm like, sure, I can make that work. So she gave me about, and then one of the most amazing things is she's a pro, right? She's really both a director as an actor. She's really fantastic. And she walks into my office when Richie and I were doing a reading, and she's like, I just want to let you know, Oualid, here I'm an actor. I don't want you to hold back anything. I want you to feel free to tell me anything. I'm not a director. I know you know me as a director. And that was really wonderful. That's incredibly generous of her. And on set, she was that.
Very rare to find a director who puts themselves in the hands of another director and trusts the process and trusts the vision. I mean, she acted in Capernaum. She had a small role, but to see her.
I mean, here she really is, and she represents a lot for Lebanese people and for a Lebanese audience. There's a maternal aspect of her. I mean, she is the mother, she is the teacher, and she does represent that, and she is, as we all know, an icon in Lebanon. And but she was so humble in the work, and clearly, whenever we had any notes on some takes, it was really wonderful because she is a director. Like if we'd exchange one note, and she'd like, okay, I get it. She knows it. You know what I mean? And that comes from both her being an actor and a director.
My last question before we turn it over to the audience. You told us at the beginning to make sure we listen to the song with the credits.
End, you needed it, no?
I kind of forgot what it was. I'm thinking, did he end with Feiruz? Did he end with,
of course not.
And you end up with the Ellen Parsons Project, Eye in the Sky. Why?
So did you guys need that song? Yes.
We know it, but how did you? I mean, why did you decide?
Why? Because I felt first of all, that song came out that week.
Oh.
So, yes, it came out at the beginning of the week. It was dropped on the BBC, and I remember hearing it at the tuck shop, which is when you hear it in the film. And two, there was a choice between people don't really regard the music at the credits as a major choice directorially, but it is in this case. Because I felt that I owed it to the audience to kind of lift the spirits a little bit. I didn't want the audience to walk away with I felt that the film was very heavy at one point. It gets to a place where it's really, and Eye in the Sky kind of at least breaks that a little bit and kind of takes you out of that moment, and it was necessary, and it was of the period. If I had put score there, I mean, the tone with which an audience would leave the theater would be much heavier. And I want this, that I'm here, right? And we are here, and Lebanon is still resilient. So in spite of all of this, I wanted the overall feeling to be sort of a positive feeling and a hopeful one to some degree.
That song is a happy song. So there is a version of Alan Parsons' Project project, High in the Sky, remixed with Kamil Badani, who's an Arab hip-hop artist.
Oh, I did not know that.
And you should check it out, because that could have worked too. It was happy, but yet some Arabic mixed in. Anyway, so everybody, please let us know if you have a question. En français, بالعربي, بالإنجليزي, any language you translate, right?
Yes.
Okay. Hi.
Marhaba.
What was the symbolism of the pigeons?
Wow, that's the first question you asked. What did they make you feel?
I don't know.
What did they make you feel?
At the end, it felt like the humans were gone and they took over.
Correct. Well, there's a lot of layers to the pigeons being there. First of all, when I'm writing, I wrote the pigeons in. I somehow write animals because I feel animals express the inexpressible sometimes. The pigeons have moments where they feel somber, where they feel peaceful, where they feel, at different intervals in the film they exist, right? But the first thing that you see in the pigeons is when the pigeons arrive. First of all, the pigeons are in formation when they arrive at the beginning, which automatically sort of echoes the images we've seen from World War II of like airplanes coming, right? So and then when Majid asks about them at the beginning, it's almost like it automatically telegraphs that this is not your average day, something's different in the world. So the literal, so that's kind of Shakespearean. They're sort of a harbinger of change. Whether it's good or bad, we don't know, Because at the end of the day, they're also, they belong in the sky, they don't belong in the building, but then the sky they're not up in the sky because there's war in the sky, so therefore they're in the building. And at the same time, in Lebanon, we have a culture of homing pigeons. And I'm sure that exists in Palestine, it exists in Jordan, in almost any Middle Eastern city, in Istanbul as well. So these pigeons, the only reason these pigeons would be at the school is because they've lost their roof. So for me, and I didn't really understand this until I really finished writing, and as a matter of fact, finished making the film. When I was watching it, I'm like, that final shot told me so much, and it was written in the script from the first draft. And I really didn't understand what it is. It just felt like that's where the film needed to end. And I realized afterwards that for me, they're a quiet metaphor of displacement. So that's...
Well, in the passing of time, it seemed to me like these kids weren't going to go back to that school for a while. And
for a while.
Has becoming...
it's like you ask yourself... Exactly.
The dust, the left pencils, and exams on the floor.
And one of the things, it's like about also man versus nature, right? So nature has its own way of expressing where man can't and takes over. I don't know if anybody's been in Beirut. The moment Lebanon opened up to each other was Beirut, downtown Beirut, which was the no man's land, which was really left. I remember going into Beirut at the time, and you go to these buildings, and these incredible buildings, and you don't just see buildings. There's actually forests that have broken through the tile and are rising through and coming out of all these windows. Nature took over when man leaves. It will take over when man leaves. It's nature. Nature is way stronger than us.
So, do we have anybody else who'd like to?
Yes.
Hi.
Thank you very, very much. I was very moved by the film.
Thank you.
The interplay of the dilemma of the adults, protecting the kids in mind, and at the same time reassuring them. And that and the erotic or emotional life of the adults and the kids. Very well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
And there is an adult relationship, and then there's the puppy love.
Yes, there's two. There's love that's contaminated, which is adult love is always weighted down, and as we know, if we're not in the Middle East, adult love in the US is we're weighed down by the mechanics of life, by everything that's happening.
And these two lines when she said, "You didn't waste your time with me," and he got on the bus, and we don't know what's going to happen next.
But you know that there's love in the air. There's,
Or when the children's hands.
When yes.
And she didn't
Yes.
move away. Yes, yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you for the film. It's very beautiful, but also very tense.
Very tense.
And in more than one occasion, you have the camera focus on the water in the swimming pool.
Correct.
I was wondering what was the intention of including that.
The tension. This is part of my use. It's similar to how I use the sky in the film. I use a lot of the natural elements in the film to actually build tension. And for me, this image somehow expresses, like, it's also foreboding. As beautiful of an image as it is, it's also foreboding. I mean, there is a foreboding sense, and the foreboding sense is similar to the shot with the title where you see the airplane coming through the sky, and then the second thing is you see the birds coming in formation through the sky, which kind of echoes a lot of the imagery that we've seen. By the way, these were normal birds. I didn't form them in post. So, okay, so yes. And then the pool, same thing. And then there's different parts, and then even this is for me no different than when the bird just lands, when the pigeon lands on the windowsill and he's making eye contact with Wissam. You wonder what he's telling him. He's telling him a lot without saying anything. So this is for me like just part of the linguistics and part of the semiotics that really form the fabric of the film and the world that I've created. Yes.
Oualid, it was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Is your heart okay?
My heart's okay, yes. I wanted to ask you about the animation.
Yes.
And did you play around with maybe having more of it? You know, rather than just the few places you had it, which were beautiful. And when Tigran showed up at the end, I had all these goosebumps.
Yes.
It was really like a fantastic climax there.
Yeah.
You know?
There was one possible additional scene with animation which I didn't end up keeping in the film, which comes earlier, which would have actually set this up a little bit more. But then I figured what I had here was subtle enough, because my nature is very subtle. So I like subtle things, and I just feel like if someone pays attention, the animation would actually work. It was very clear to me when I first wrote the script, this is also in the original. Like, I knew that this is how the film was going to end. And it was very, very necessary for me to end that way, because those are like the snippets of the imagination. It's almost like the second world, which is Wissam's imaginary world, is trying to kind of fight its way through until at the end it just comes. And it comes with the realization of love, while at the same time with watching the city in such a state. Where do you go? You only go to somewhere where you can imagine something better. While at the same time, it also is what we call in Greek mythology or Greek literature as an ex machina ending. Because overall, as a feeling, and I think you probably share the same thing, is the problem in the Middle East and in Lebanon is so big that you need something like way bigger than us to come and like just put a stop to it. And it's the dream. And in the film, you kind of, the reason you get this emotion is because it works on so many layers. It works for Wissam because it's part of Wissam's narrative, but from a filmmaking standpoint, it also, the tension that you've just gone through, I just felt like this needed to happen. Like, because I needed to lift the audience out of this tension. The tension at that point is so high that you just want out. And the out is into this kid's imagination. And cinema affords us that freedom. And it's the one place where I really took license as a cineast.
Yeah, we need a Tigran.
We need a Tigran.
Send to the Middle East ASAP.
Exactly.
Not Grandizer, then a Tigran.
Tigran.
Stronger,
as Wissam said, yes.
Yeah.
Just one follow-up. I was curious, did you think about ending the film there? Rather than going back to the pigeons, because you lift us up with this beautiful animation
Exactly.
and this ex machina and this catharsis, if you will.
It is.
Then you just put us back with the refugee of the pigeons.
Yes.
Back in the abandoned school.
If you looked out
I
the
had-
windows, they were under the dome too, right?
Right, yeah,
Yes.
they were, right, the
Yes.
animation.
It was, I never thought that I would not have these two endings. They are two endings, and I would agree with you. One is the narrative ending, and the other one I would refer to as the thematic denouement of the film, which is where you are actually, I'm leaving you with a complete moment of reflection. What is it that I just saw? And the last shot works because it tells us nothing will be the same again. What we just lived through, and the moment the kids, and this is the third iteration of the hallway in that point of view. You see it the first time at the beginning where it's quiet. The second time you see it with the kids running through and shutting the door at the end. And then the third time it's a new world. So it's like they sort of echo each other, these images. Yes.
Thanks.
I mean, I was told to take that shot out.
Of the pigeon?
Yes. But I just profoundly felt like I would be just doing a disservice to the film if I did that.
So does anybody else? We welcome questions بالعربي. اللي بيحكوا عربي.
I will translate.
Right?
Yeah.
When we translate, of course.
Yes.
For context.
This is a question a little bit about your thoughts on writing.
Mhm.
I remember there was a line that was recited by the secretary, I think Layla, and she said that they had weathered this for about 5 or 6 years.
Yep.
And so when you're writing, how do you kind of bring out that fact for viewers to maybe consider whether this is early on or later on, and kind of what the children are experiencing, like are they used to war or is it newer for them?
I think, yeah, I mean, that line was very pertinent line. It sort of wrote itself then, because I do think it provides the context a little bit more, because if this was the first day of a war, like, it would be very difficult to justify the blaseness up until that moment. And it really is a reflection of, at that point, in the reason we kept going to school. I mean, we were going to school and we knew there was war in other parts of the country. And I think that this was very important to make sure that it's actually mentioned, so that it kind of clarifies the initial lack of urgency. Because at one point they realized, oh no, this is something else, is altogether way bigger. Because that was, in fact, the day when the entire country was at war for the first time in the 6 years since the war began. Because generally, most wars, they don't take place all over the country, the violence per se. Like, a lot of times they take place in different towns or villages, or there's a problem in the south, and that's, where life goes on. On this particular day, things changed. So I felt that this was necessary to write. I mean, this is sort of, it sort of just states a fact, and the fact explains a lot why the teachers are behaving the way they are, and why some of them are like, and the other ones are like, okay, this is not normal. This is another level, which is really the conflict between Nadine, who's Miss Yasmin's character, who's kind of in denial that this is not your average day, versus the others.
Yes, the line was very appropriate.
Yeah, it was very important. Yeah, thank you.
We have a
Two
question.
more questions. guys.
Yeah, question is, did this movie heal some of the anguish that you've had with
Of
the
course.
separation? Where are you after this movie?
Still healing, but even angrier at some point.
Why?
Because of what's still happening. I mean, this film really tells us a lot about the fact that it's been 40 years and nothing has changed in Lebanon, or anywhere in the world for that matter. I mean, we still have policies of war everywhere in the world, and it makes you question really the reasons for them, and you realize maybe the reasons are not really based on principles, but just based on economics or based on greed. And it makes you realize that maybe maybe nobody wants to allow justice to take place, because for peace to happen, and you cannot have peace without justice, and justice takes brave people, and the world is full of cowardly leaders.
Not to mention cathartic for every Lebanese who lived through that
Yes.
period. It's just, I've never felt so, I don't want to say violated, it's like you looked in at the fears of the child at the time, and it translated. So we take one more question. I think the amazing director, Jackie Zerboum, has a question.
Totally.
Oualid, I just want to say that was an incredible film, very heavy and beautiful. I have a couple questions actually. One is on the sound design.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed the radio reports. Are those real? Did
Okay.
you find archives? Also, I noticed the sound design getting super loud at parts. Is that from like your memory trauma? And then what are you working on next?
Okay.
A true director.
First of all, thank you for asking about the radio broadcasts. I worked on the radio basically, because we were doing two sides of this radio, and on the second and third viewing, you realized there's a radio that's right-wing, that's being listened to by Miss Leila, and there's a radio that's left-wing, that's being listened to by Joseph. And this was very important. I worked on this with a really fantastic researcher and author, Sahar Mandour, in Beirut, and we really structured the radio narrative. Because the radio narrative really tells you minute by minute what was going on. And we couldn't really subtitle everything because it's happening over dialogue a lot. So upon second and third viewing, if you understand Arabic, you'll get it. And on the script, it exists, but it's very hard because I had to make some hard choices when we were subtitling the film. Where do I want the audience to be? Because it was impossible for me to put all this information in there. So that's one. Some of it was archival, which was the Radio Monte Carlo, because that was existed. However, everything that was related to the leftist radios during the war, they were deliberately destroyed at the time by the invader, so that no record is kept. So we had to really unearth a lot of records and unearth a lot of, there was a lot of research done in order to rebuild the radio narrative. So that's one. Sound design wise, I worked with Rana Eid, and it was very important. I sent her the script. Most of the sound was already written in the script. So every cue was in the script, because the antagonist in this film is coming through the sound. It's what they react to, it's what's causing all the tension, it's what's causing all the conflict. However, I was in East Beirut, so you saw my experience. Rana Eid, who's my sound designer, was in West Beirut, and it was very important for us to create a convergence of my sonic experience of that day and her sonic experience of that day. She was under the bombs. And that's why I wanted the film to also translate not just to people who lived in East Beirut, but this is a film about all of us Lebanese, whether we're under the bombs or not. So that's that. As to my next film, it was just announced 2 weeks ago, so just do the research.
Well, give us a hint,
No. It's an adaptation of a book called Bilkis. It's a French book right now written by a Moroccan author. It takes place between New York and an unknown country in the Middle East or somewhere else in the world. It's really profoundly about the story of women rather. The two characters are one Muslim and one Jewish, and it's about them demanding to take back the way they can practice their faith in a world where patriarchy has taken religion and misshapen it.
Wow.
Very tough subject. I don't know if I'm going to succeed. Wish me luck, because it could be dangerous if I do it wrong. All right.
Well, if anybody did do it
Yes.
after seeing this, it's going to be ready to
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you to the Arab Film and Media Institute and Serge Bakhalian, who brings us these gems of these
Thank you.
amazing people. Serge, thank you.